Now, a guy said to me years ago, he said, life is 90% bluff and intimidation. And I must have been, I don't know, 30 at the time. And I thought, really? Okay. Not sure whether I believed that was true or not, but in hindsight, looking back, I'm now 60, just over 60, so it's true, it is true. Life is 90% bluff and intimidation, in my experience. So, we've all been told that you have to support the Ukraine. You've got to dig deep in your pocket. I know you're struggling to keep the house warm and feed the family, but it's more important to give your money to Zelensky because he's fabulously rich, and I don't think he's going to buy any fighter planes out of his own PayPal account, is he? All the money that people have been giving him, I don't know what he's going to do with that, but they're all there with their hand out, and they say, well, it's a democracy, they've been invaded by a foreign power. Ukraine's Russian, okay, it's full of Russians, okay, and Russia gave them independence one day, so you've got half the people are not Russian and the other half are Ukrainian, because don't forget, borders move over history. So you've got a lot of Nazis, okay, you've heard of the SS, haven't you? Looking back to a political standard from the 1930s. Got this group called the SS, and these were all like head cases that were into Nietzsche and listened to Chopin, okay, and envied the world, and so they put them into various government offices like the police. The SS unit in the police was the Gestapo, I suppose, and they put them into the German army. They called them the Waffen-SS, and these are just extremists. And the Ukraine has got their version of the SS, and they like swastikas and they're into that sort of stuff. The Russians didn't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm bored, let's go and invade the Ukraine. That sounds like a good idea. No, there's problems in the Ukraine. You've made some country independent, they voted someone in. Well, Hitler was voted in, and then he changed the law, didn't he, to not be able to vote him out. He had to keep him. And so you've got all these Nazis in the Ukraine, and they're ethnically cleansing the Ukraine of Russians and murdering Russians who were Ukrainians in the east. The Russians are mainly in the east of the Ukraine, and they're obviously appealing to Russia for help. They were being murdered by the Ukrainian SS. Oh, are you? Right. And in the end, they've thought, fuck it, and they've gone in and they're trying to keep the peace, and why you would want to give Nazis money and guns. I'm not saying they're all Nazis in the Ukraine, of course they're not, but there is an element in the Ukraine, quite a big element, that are Nazis. Okay, that's what I'm saying to you. So you want to think very carefully for yourself before you go sending them money. Would you send Hitler money for bricks? Because he'd build an oven, a crematorium, wouldn't he? You don't send them money. You don't give them anything. That's my opinion on the subject. Now, you might read Nietzsche and listen to Chopin, okay, and you might swallow all the bullshit that these Western governments are feeding you on, but I don't, okay? And I'm not telling you you're wrong, I'm just telling you to open your eyes and investigate the subject before you make up your mind. Good morning, YouTubers. Well, I put the news on this morning, and one thing caught my attention. Apart from the earthquake in Turkey, which is really bad, but I'm trying to stick with, because there's lots of other people that do news and stuff. But I was one thing that particularly took my attention was the Americans have shot down a UFO, okay, just off the coast of Alaska, I think, or just somewhere around there, that was entering their airspace, and they reckon it was flying at 40,000 feet, and it was the size of a small car, and it was shot down by an F-22 and a Sidewinder missile or something similar. That's all the news they've got. They didn't know what it was, and you'd think with today's technology they could identify a target before they shoot it down. And when I say UFO, I don't mean like an alien spacecraft. I mean an unidentified flying object. They didn't know what it was, but it, you know, it certainly pricked my attention. I thought to myself, that's interesting. Because obviously tensions are a bit high now, because they burst a balloon, didn't they, last week? A spy balloon from China, by the way. Look at Ukraine. Look at what's going on in the Ukraine. Look how many people are just blindly following the government. The government's there like clapping seals. Here's money, give more money to Zelensky, give more money to Zelensky. Zelensky's like that. His PayPal account's obviously full, you know, you can't get any more money in it because there's not enough zeros, is there, on the screen so he could buy his own fighter planes if he wanted them. And a lot of people, you know, I try to say to them, you know, Zelensky is not that nice, actually. And they go, well, it said in the news, and people are being manipulated and bluffed all the time. You know, how many people have actually gone on Google and typed in Ukraine? Where's the Ukraine? Oh, there it is. Google Maps. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's right next to Russia, look, and Russia goes all the way to America. Yes, it does. Yeah, oh, yes, it does. So Ukraine's like that big, and Russia is like. They're giving him money, and they're giving him guns and bombs and things to fight the Russians. And look at the population of Russia. Look at the population of the Ukraine, you know. People are just making shitloads of money out of a proxy war. And people are suffering and dying. Which brings me back to Turkey. Now look at all the people that went to bed in Turkey in their apartment buildings and just living their lives, and the next thing they're all dead because the building fell down in an earthquake. It's nobody's fault. It's an earthquake, isn't it? You just don't know when your number's up, so why would you waste your time trying to kill other people? You're being manipulated. You're being bluffed. You're being had over by rich people who are making shitloads of money, selling guns to both sides. You know, it's just the way it is. You should turn around and say, fuck you. And, you know, people have said for years, you know, all these people who want peace, they're wussies, and no, they're not. They've actually got more fucking balls than most people. And it's just pointless to go around killing people, isn't it? There's no benefit to anyone other than the people who are selling the weapons, and they're going to get rich. And yet the people who are telling you that it's good to give Zelensky money because these people pretend to be more intelligent than you are. You see, I consider myself to be a common man, okay, and I use common man's language. Everything that I'm saying to you now, you can understand because I'm not using words, am I, that people don't use. Whereas people who are trying to blag you will come up with things like, they start a sentence with, I saw one the other day, I think I made some notes. In modern contemporary Discord, and then they go off into, and you think, hang on, what did he just say? And I had a barrister years ago who I had to pay £350 an hour to him, and we got him in the pub there chatting away, thinking, well, we're buying him beer, that's going to be a lot cheaper than 350 quid, so we're just off the clock, you know, chatting to him about stuff. And he kept coming out with these big long words in mid-sentence, and I'd go, whoa, you stop you there. What did you just say? Oh, I said, I said, what does that mean? I said, come on, for the benefit of the uneducated. And he'd go, yes, well that word means, but you could do it if you wanted to. Right, okay. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? And they do it's because they're blagging you. They want you to think that because they've got a larger vocabulary than you have, they're using words that people don't use, unless you've been to Eton, you know, then they're obviously more intelligent than you are. And the common man doesn't carry a dictionary in his pocket. And the common man doesn't say, stop, can I stop you there? Just, what does that word mean? Because it's the emperor's clothes. They'll just sit there nodding like this. They haven't got a clue what he's just said. They're not going to get the dictionary out and start looking up. How did you spell that again? What was that? Make a note. Because he's been waffling on and on. He's used several more words that you don't understand. And you're going, oh, bollocks. Because common man doesn't carry a dictionary in his pocket to decipher or translate what these concepts want to tell you. And we're just trying to piss you off. They're trying to blag you into thinking they're more intelligent than you are, so therefore you just nod and oh yeah, whatever he says because he's cleverer than me. And then what they're actually doing is they're manipulating you to make you think, because they'll go, oh yes, I'm well read, I'm very educated, I read Nietzsche, and I listen to Chopin, marvellous, Chopin's marvellous. It's all emperor's clothes. It's all emperor's clothes, you know, because if you see the emperor walking down the street and he's naked and you laugh at him, and you're an idiot. Because can't you see the beautiful clothes that he's wearing of gold and silk? It's very much intimidation. Life is very much intimidation. And people who start quoting Nietzsche, you think, and they go, isn't he marvellous? Isn't he marvellous? He's a philosopher. For the benefit of those of you who don't know, Nietzsche was a. You can Google him. He was a philosopher a German philosopher in the Victorian days. Whose 4 bits of advice in life was recognise your envy. You know, if you are envious of someone who's got a Ferrari, for example, you think, oh, look at him, he's got a Ferrari and I'm standing at the bus stop in the rain. Well, he said it was a good thing to recognise your envy and figure out a way of getting that thing that you envy, like his Ferrari. Right. The second thing he went on to point out about the prospects of life was don't drink alcohol, because that will blur your focus on getting your Ferrari. You see, it'll make you just chill out and relax and enjoy yourself with other people. You can't you should drink milk and water. The third thing he said is don't become a Christian, because that'll give you a moral compass. It will give you morals and standards to adhere to as a civilization, whereas you need to be ruthless and cut to the chase and get what you want. And finally he said God is dead. So no matter what you do in life to achieve your goals, you're not going to go and burn in hell forever, because there's no God, right? There's nothing after death. You've got nothing to lose. And that's the nub of Nietzsche. You can waste your life reading his works if you wanted to, but the sort of people that would pick up on people like Nietzsche would be Nazis, and they would just simply kill the man in the Ferrari and throw his body into the gutter and take the Ferrari, and that was the Nazi mentality. And so don't be blagged by people who, I'm very well read, I read Nietzsche, they start quoting shit like this, because it's all bollocks. I do believe there is a God. I do believe there is an afterlife. That's just me. You might not believe that, but that's what I believe. And so therefore everything Nietzsche just came out with was a load of bollocks. But people should study the Nazis. They're the primary example of what can go wrong in humanity. You know, it might start with all the great things, but there was lots of things that the Nazis did that were for example, a working man could afford to go on cruise liners. They had cruise liners for working people to go on holiday. Whereas you go to the UK at the same time in the 1930s, people didn't even have cars. You know, rich people had cars. Your working man had a bicycle if he was lucky. And that was it. And they were struggling to put food on the table and keep warm. Whereas Germans were going on cruises, on cruise liners, and they were having plans to have a car for everybody, the working man's car, Volkswagen. You know, so they had a lot of positive things, but they'll never be remembered for positive things because they stooped to the levels of depravity. That means really bad stuff, okay? They got as bad gets, mass murder. You don't get much worse than that. And at the same time, you've got these universities, and you've got the finest engineers in the world and the biggest brains. These people weren't stupid, not by any means, but they were just depraved and evil. And it just goes to show that how the masses can be blagged. Because if I was someone who wanted, my envy was to conquer the world and sit on top of a pyramid, you know, and have the world, the sun shine on me, and I couldn't do it on my own. I'd need people to come with me. I couldn't invade Russia on my own, but I wouldn't get very far. So you need to have the masses behind you, and the masses have herd mentality, and you know, a lot of people don't think for themselves. You know, you say, look, Nietzsche, have you read Nietzsche? Oh, he's marvellous, isn't he? Marvellous. Oh, yeah, I've read Nietzsche, yeah. Who's Nietzsche? Oh, did you listen to Chopin? Chopin's marvellous, isn't he? I've got his LP. Wonderful. I sit for hours listening to Chopin. Isn't it marvellous? No, it's not marvellous. It's awful. Okay, but this is the kind of crap that these people come out with, and they tell you what to be into. Do you remember the 70s, the 1970s? Medallion man, and his hairy chest and his big collars, and he had long hair, looked like a woman, and they even wore trousers that were so wide at the bottom it looked like they were wearing long skirts, and they wore high heels, platforms, and they flapped around with sunglasses on in the dark, looking cool with medallions going, we're all hanging out in the cool corner, you know, no squares over here, man. And they just looked ridiculous, and you couldn't tell them, you couldn't say you all look ridiculous, because you get your head kicked in. So you just had to wait for them to work out that they kept tripping up on their own trousers and face planted on the ground and things, and falling off their platforms and twisting their ankles and finishing up in hospital with a broken foot. And in the end they just took all this crap off, and we moved into the 1980s. But that's a good example of fashions. Like, you don't think it's cool, you're told it's cool, and so because you're told it's cool, you think it's cool, and therefore you go with it. So life's actually too short, isn't it? You know, you've got just as much right to live on this planet as anyone else. By the way, we're all equal, because we're all earthlings, aren't we, on our own planet? This is it. And you've got people manipulating you and bluffing you and blagging you and taking money off you, and you just become an obedient servant, don't you, if you conform to their rules and their wishes. And you know, you can see where the Nazis got angry and thought, fuck you, I'm going to sort you out. You know, I'm not sticking up for them in any way, but free speech is a big thing in my book. You know, you had free speech in England. You didn't have free speech in France, and you were coming up to the French Revolution, that sort of period, and you couldn't speak out against the king because you thrown in prison or executed or whatever. And there was a guy called Voltaire, you've probably heard of Voltaire. He came to England and he loved England. He thought England was marvellous because he could speak in England, he could speak his mind, and he had satire, he had people taking the piss out of the crown. And it was allowed in England, free speech, whereas in France it wasn't allowed, and you'd be taken away. And in Nazi world, there was no free speech. You couldn't criticise the government. You're moving into dangerous territory. I mean, in France, you know what happened in France. They dragged the king out of his palace and cut his head off. And they went into the French Revolution, and that all ended in tears, didn't it? Nazi Germany, that all ended in tears with the destruction of the entire country from one end to the other. But it was just rubble and survivors. That was it. So free speech is very important in the free world, and we're now seeing clampdowns on free speech. You know, people are not allowed to have opinions. You know, wokeism is coming in, and you're not allowed to say anything that might offend people. And I say, no, that's wrong. My wife brought this up, and I agree with her completely. You know, we should allow people to have opinions. For example, if a Nazi got up and started preaching Nazism to us, we could sit there like this and we could listen to him, and then we could come to an opinion that he's a crank and he's a nutter, and we shouldn't listen to him, and we should see him for what he really is. But there's always the danger that people will go, yeah, and they'll go along with the flow, and then you get caught up in the same problems you got caught up in last time. Hopefully we're not going to make the same mistakes twice, but you can see why censorship moves in, because people are paranoid and afraid that people might take over. And people don't want people taking over, they want to be in charge. Why should they be in charge? Why does anyone have to be in charge? You know, I'm sure we're all capable of living and surviving and having a law enforcement community that are just there, not as debt collectors for the rich, but as just keep everyone safe. You know, do we actually need governments? Do we? I mean, the Ministry of Defence in the UK, I mean, to me that's defence. In the old days, defence was a castle. But a castle couldn't go on the offensive, could it? You know, it's there to defend, and that's, for me, that's defence. You defend your land against foreign invaders, which doesn't include invading Afghanistan, for example. I'm not having a go at anyone who went to Afghanistan. I'm just using that as an example of defence. How is that defence? How is that defending our islands? You know. So that's about it, really. I've waffled on enough. But then, if you're a free thinker, the authorities might think, well, you're not listening, you're not following the herd, so therefore you're dangerous. Might have to put you in prison and lock you up for your own good. I photographed it, so I'll compare it.